Well, now I'm thinking 6,600 by the end of this year and 7,500 by the end of next year. It's a bull market. It's been a bull market for quite some times. Anybody who tries to day trade it, I hope they don't have another job that's their job and that they do it well. But generally speaking, stocks are in fact meant to be held for the long run. Warren Buffett's been saying it. Professor Jeremy Siegel's been saying it.
Yeah.
And the problem is people who pick tops rarely pick bottoms. I have an amazing track record at picking bottoms, and that's because I have a relative that I don't speak to too often, who always calls me up at bottoms and says, "Eddie, should I get out?"
I
And
listen, I have the same relative. And I even have a
yeah,
twin brother who
I
does the
just
same
I just
thing.
I just compare that to the investor's intelligence bull bear ratio. And when he calls me up and when that ratio is under one, I said, bingo, here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I find interesting, and we've been both doing this long enough. I think in the last 2, 3 days, I've read now 5 or 6 long, in-depth articles about how the AI revolution, it's just another dot-com bubble and so on and so forth. And I do remember the dot-com bubble. I think you do too.
Yeah.
But we're a little different, aren't we?
I think so. First of all, there really aren't a lot of these dinky little dot coms that
Yeah.
have raised a lot of money and burn it and then they're gone. And when they're gone, suddenly all this demand for technology disappears, which is kind of what happened. It was a lot of small companies raising a lot of money that had just had an idea and the idea didn't pan out and they burned a lot of money and then they went out of business and investors figured out that there was no point in funding these kind of companies anymore, and the whole thing kind of imploded. Also, there was a lot of borrowing in the junk bond market by telecommunications
Right.
companies, and they did a
Like
lot of
WorldCom, for instance.
yeah. They did a lot of seller financing. It's amazing how much money you can make when you lend money to your customers to buy your product. But if they start stiffing you, then you're really in trouble, and that's kind of what happened back then.
Yeah,
Here we've got these amazingly cash-rich, magnificent seven companies that have a tremendous amount of free cash flow, and they're investing it. And if the investments go bad, they'll figure something else to do, but they're not going to go out of business. And meanwhile, they're buying a lot of these dinky little companies on their own and trying to leverage up what they do into bigger businesses. It makes a lot more sense than sort of the model we had back during the tech bubble and tech wreck in the 1999-2000 period.
Yeah. So, there was this chairman of the Fed back at that time come up with that irrational exuberance thing. You're
Yeah.
saying poo poo, no irrational exuberance, eh?
Well, he actually said that he asked the question whether it's irrational
Yeah.
exuberance, and he did that in I think 1995 or maybe it was 1996.
Yeah.
But he didn't know for sure. He was asking the question, and then by the late 90s, it was saying, maybe it's kind of like a lottery. You buy a ticket and hope you win, and if you don't, so be it. So it was kind of a bizarre explanation for what was going on back then. He kind of justified the speculative bubble as as a lottery. But anyways, here we are today, and there's some really good companies that have done extremely well. Um, I think there's clearly some hype in the AI situation, but the reality is AI is just a continuation of the digital revolution that
Yeah.
started in the mid 1960s. That started with the IBM mainframe, and the digital revolution is all about processing as much information as possible, as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible. So from that perspective, we went from IBM mainframes all the way through mini computers to PCs, and then a big event was the cloud, and the cloud has begotten, or I don't know what the right tense is of that word is. It's biblical, I think. Uh, but it led to let's keep it in English. It led to the AI evolution. AI is doing the same thing IBM mainframes were doing. It's processing lots of information faster and quicker. It's just doing it faster and quicker. And the more we are able to do that, the more information we process. And I think it's the real deal. I use it all day long
I do too.
as an assistant, as a research assistant. And like if you hire any research assistant, you're gonna get some, you can get one that's a dummy, so you fire it, or you get one that's really smart that every now and then hallucinates and makes mistakes. It's up to you to kind of make sure that it doesn't do that and you correct it.
Yeah,
But
I was
yeah,
thinking back being a junior research analyst, when that thing called spreadsheets started,
yeah,
and but I was before the spreadsheets started.
yeah,
And today, my lord, if you came out of a business school owing about $250,000 in tuition, and you're looking for a research analyst job at Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, I am told by many people at both those institutions that their hiring is not nearly what it used to be.
yeah. Well, a lot of the menial jobs that they forced their new entrants to, spend 12 hours a day. Th Those jobs have been automated, and artificial intelligence has had a lot to do with that. But it's just a matter of a couple of years, if not months, before we all have personal assistants where we talk to them. Uh, Altman over at OpenAI said there's a lot of demand for memory with AI. Of course there
Yeah.
is. You want to be able to talk to your AI and said, let's pick up where we left off last week. Now, obviously, it can get a little creepy if you kind of get a little too personal with your AI, and there are people that are doing that. It's kind of weird.
So
So
you're talking about AI porn now, Ed? Is that what you're
well, I'm not going there, but I'm saying
saying?
it's just kind of there are some creepy stories about people getting kind of
Yeah.
very friendly.
Yeah.
Uh, it's kind of like that movie, I guess, that Phoenix
Right.
was in. But generally speaking, I think it's a very powerful tool. And the reason I'm optimistic on the impact on technology is because I'm thinking, so I'm using this thing. I'm not talking to it. Well, actually, you can talk to Gemini, which is the Google version,
Hmm.
but you just can't have you got to keep
Keep
typing in
typing.
your questions or moving on to the next subject. But so the more I use it, the more data I am creating, and if it starts memorizing these things so that we can, continue where we finished off, that's a huge demand on the cloud. And so no wonder that these cloud companies are doing so well. So everybody's saying, well, they're not making any money on AI. No, they're making money on the cloud.
Wow.
The more we use the cloud, the more they charge us.
Yeah, Microsoft came out like yesterday saying that basically they were sold out. That that their cloud business, they had more customers willing to pay a 12 million or 15 million dollar down payment, and you're totally right. I mean, and I would say that it's a little bit the hype that bothers me a little bit about AI is again going back to a million years ago. I mean, in some way, artificial intelligence is sort of a wrapper on machine learning and neuro linguistic programming
Yeah.
that is just made everything so easy to use. I'm a Gemini fan myself. I speak to it now. I don't even type to it,
Mhm.
and it will answer questions for me that I had no idea, and then show validity too, show where it came from.
Well, let me ask you
I
this, just on a side note here.
yeah.
The audience can go get a sandwich for a second. But so when you use Gemini, you talk to it, and then don't you have to actually on your keyboard tell it
Yes.
that's the
Yeah.
question?
Enter.
So you
Yes.
can't just like have a normal conversation, correct?
Well, yeah, today. I don't know about in 25 days. So,
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm waiting for. I'm
yeah.
waiting to walk in and say, Gemini, let's give me a quick analysis of the industrial production number that just came out. And I think that's like you said, could be a few days away.
Yeah. Well, all right. Let's say that takes me to my next question, right? So, you know, market's looking for cuts. I think we both agree on that. In the Fed or not? What is your since you've been right on everything else, Dr. Ed? How about
Yeah,
next week?
I have a contrary streak, I guess. I don't try to be contrary just to be contrary. I find that when everybody agrees on something, that I can't really add more to that thought process. So I tend
I
to
agree.
focus. And by the way, that's why I'm often viewed as a perma bull, is because the perma bears do such a great job of telling us everything that's going to go wrong. I can't come up with anything new. So, I try to keep myself busy and I find out reasons that things might not go bad. And so far, so good on average.
So the
But
PMI numbers got cut. Does that affect your outlook?
the purchasing managers?
Yeah,
No, no. I mean, if you're looking at the S&P Global that came out today, they actually they showed that the services came down a little bit,
yeah, but
but it's still right up there in the 50s, above 50, and the same
well,
thing with manufacturing. So no,
sure.
no, quite the opposite. It convinces me that the economy is resilient.
Yeah,
A lot of the weakness in May and June employment with that downward revision made a lot of sense. I mean, if you're an employer, don't you think you'd kind of you wouldn't fire anybody in May and June, but you might say, let's hold off on hiring until we figure out what this cockamamie tariff situation is all about. And then after a few months, you said, you know what, I can't wait to figure this
right.
thing out. My business is good. I need to hire, and you move ahead and hire. Or else you figure out that I can do this with technology and I don't need to hire, but I do need to augment the productivity of my workers with this technology. So I think the surprise is going to be that there's two more inflation numbers between now and the FOMC meeting on September 16th to the
Hmm.
17th. I think they're going to be on the hot side, not scalding hot, but on the hot side. And then I think the big surprise could be that the payroll number is up 100,000, which we used to think is weak, but with the border closed with deportation, maybe 100,000 is really all we need to keep the unemployment rate around 4%, which is kind of what I'm thinking. And if you look at how weak May and June were, they were like, 14,000 here, 19,000 there.
Yeah.
And then July was 73,000. So if you look at it for my half full glasses, the conclusion is that, hey, we had a big rebound in July employment. And now watch if we go to 100,000, people might come around to my view and say, the labor market's still okay. And the Fed really doesn't need to cut, especially since inflation hasn't gotten to their target of 2%. And besides, the Fed chair might want to stick it to the president, insults him on a daily
I know
basis.
on his last way out. Sayonara.
Yeah, I mean, why would he want to cave if there's no reason to cave?
I'm with you.
Um, I mean, clearly he's saying he's data dependent. I've been saying, the only question about Powell when he gives a speech on Friday, August 22nd, which will be tomorrow,
Yeah.
is whether he'll be a dove, a hawk, or an owl. And I think he's going to be an owl. He's going to be hooting, sitting there on the limb, just eyes wide open, said, I'm just watching the data, folks. And
Yeah.
depending on what it shows, the next two inflation numbers, the next payroll up number, that's what will influence my thinking about whether that July week report, which again, the July report wasn't weak. It was the revisions to May and June
Right.
that was very weak. In
Well, Ed,
comparison, July
how
30th,
about this though? So the other inflation part here, which you and I've talked about, and I've talked with other preeminent guests, is housing prices are down. And if you were going to plug those numbers in, then that would then say that inflation, housing inflation is down. And wouldn't that, then start to say, well, then we really don't have an inflation problem. So
yeah.
yes, we
Well,
could cut.
yeah, well, housing prices don't get directly into the CPI and the PCED. It's kind of a cockamamie notion of owner-occupied rent. It's what you
Right.
as a homeowner would have to pay yourself. It's bizarre, but they can explain why they're doing it. But it is what it is, and the fact of the matter is, rent inflation or rent of shelter, including what you own, where they ascribe a rent that you pay, that inflation rate's been coming down. The
Hmm.
problem is two things. One is other services inflation rates haven't come down. They've been kind of sticky around 3 to 4%, whereas before the pandemic inflation period, they had been more like 2.5 to 3.5%. The other thing that's important here is the tariffs have had an impact on inflation in durable goods. Durable goods inflation typically is deflation. Durable goods
Right.
prices before the pandemic typically fell. Then they had a huge surge during the 22, 23 inflation an event, and then they came right back down and deflated until the tariffs hit earlier this year, and now durable goods are going up. Maybe that'll be a transitory situation, but for
I,
now, the Fed can't declare victory and say we're at 2%. The best
yeah.
they can say is we were getting there, but the tariffs kept it from falling there, and we're actually at more at 3%.
I'm surprised you used the T word, Ed. I swore off saying transitory after it. There was no transition.
Yeah, you always want to be careful with the transitory word. It didn't work out very well. Well, it was kind of weird, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the inflation of 2022, 2023 in the grand scope of human history was a transitory event. And just as everybody's getting panicky about it, it started coming down, and it was a pretty symmetrical drop in the inflation rate.
Well, he was, there was all, to me, that was just an aberration, economic aberration, to try to forecast something that basically hadn't happened for 100 years.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I'm just at the point now where I'm trying to figure out, do the housing prices coming down or rents coming down, and we all know it's ridiculous. They phone call people and say, what could you, rent your house for if you were,
yeah.
oh, that's crazy. But does that offset the tariffs, or Walmart came out today and said, those tariffs that they ate slowed down their earnings growth.
Well, the consumer is got a lot of moving parts. There's a lot going
Yeah.
on. I think one of the reasons the consumer's been resilient, and Walmart did say that upper income consumers actually were coming in
Came down, right?
and shopping. And so I think what a lot of people have missed on the consumer is me. There's a lot of people my age, baby boomers, that are retiring. I'm still working for a living, but a lot of people are retiring, and the baby boomers collectively, according to Fed data, are sitting on $80 trillion of net worth. And now's the time to spend it, baby. You retire and you don't know how long you're going to live. The kids never listen to us, so let's spend it before we have to leave anything to
It's a
them.
great lot. Well,
Um,
I will say this of my friends who are retired, I could not retire. I have like restless brain syndrome. What the hell would I do?
yeah, me
Um,
too.
but I mean, the travel. I was just looking at the text list before I got on the call with you, and I don't know. Someone's in Spain, someone's in France, just got back from Scotland. Another person is leaving for
Yeah.
Paris tomorrow. I mean, all
Yeah.
of my retired friends, they're not staying home. You're right, Ed.
Yeah, my wife and I were just in the UK, and I kept walking around like in Canterbury, and I kept telling my wife, it's a beautiful place. There's just too many of us. There are too many tourists.
Yeah,
Places.
Yeah,
I
we
wasn't.
were in Spain last year for Oh, by the way, also, if your kids or your grandkids are getting married, nobody gets married in the United States, at least in the top 20%. Everybody gets married in
Really, that's expensive.
Hawaii. This was Barcelona. Oh my God, I'll pass on Barcelona for the next
Yeah,
rest of
yeah,
my
no, it's
life.
yeah,
But you're
we were,
right. The top 20%, right, accounts for 80% of discretionary spending, right?
well, I think it's actually more than that because
Yeah.
I know from personal experience, myself and my friends, that we're helping our kids, maybe with a mortgage payment, maybe with mortgage down payments,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
with the grandchildren want to go to summer camp, they want to go to riding school. We help them out on that. I mean, when I was a young lad entering the labor force, life was affordable. I think I was making $22,000 a year working at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. And believe it or not, I could afford a one bedroom, a small dinky
Yeah.
apartment on 69th Street and Second Avenue. I mean, a really nice neighborhood for $400 a month. You can't really afford rent anymore in most places. So you got to help the kids, and I think there's a lot of that going on.
Excuse me, you choked me up on that one. You're right. You are right that, particularly in house down payments, if you come from a reasonably affluent environment, Kids are that I and my nieces and nephews, etc.
Hmm.
They they're crushing it. But a lot of those kids were working in tech companies and with tech companies, and the ones that aren't in the tech companies, those are the ones that we've wound up helping.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, again, it's the richest retiring generation of all times. And what's the point of leaving whatever you're going to leave when you're dead? You
Yeah.
might as well, help out now while you're still kicking.
All right. So there's to me the Fed was sort of tortured here a little bit on some of the data coming in. You're saying, are we going to cut rates or are we not? Yes or
No,
no?
I don't think so. I'm in the none and done camp,
Yeah, yeah,
and
I am as well. I don't.
yeah,
You can't really justify it.
you
And then,
can't
and
justify
I'm
it.
totally with you as a strong middle finger to the president. I'm probably going to say, we want to see you cry now that you didn't get your cut.
Yeah, well,
That would just be
you said
fun.
that I didn't. I don't
Oh,
want to be okay. I don't want to annoy the president because he's
yeah,
asked
I know.
Goldman Sachs economists to be fired,
You're
and
right.
fortunately, I own my own company, so it'd be hard for me to fire myself. But look, the reality is it's not justified by the economy. There's pockets of weakness. The housing economy is weak. Downtown old office buildings are weak, but
Oh,
capital
yeah,
spending, particularly in technology, is booming. Payroll employment is at an all-time record high.
yeah.
Why are we even contemplating getting a Fed put when the stock market's at an all-time record high? I mean, boo-hoo-hoo, poor us.
Right.
If they cut rates, you're going to get a melt up, and melt ups are great as long as you get out at the top. It just makes for more volatility. The Fed really has to recognize that they've actually got three mandates, not just keeping unemployment down and inflation down. They have to avoid financial instability, and from that perspective, I think especially from that perspective, there's no point in lowering interest rates.
I couldn't agree more. It would be interesting. Has the market priced in cuts? That's what I'm asking you.
Well, one more thing I want to point out is if
Sure.
people can push back and say, well, you're not taking into consideration that we need lower interest rates to help people buy houses, to lower mortgage rates. The problem is that would probably lead to even higher home prices, and whatever affordability you get with lower mortgage rate, you'd offset with higher home prices. What we need is more affordable housing, and Congress is actually considering a bipartisan bill that would reduce regulation and building. More housing, and that's exactly what we need to see. But where were you going?
Well, I'm saying A, it's not a cut. B, on the housing issue, what's intriguing and makes sense is that at least out here in beautiful Arizona, we are building houses and people are moving. And obviously, the number one place they're moving out of is California for all the obvious reasons. I just was on a plane recently with someone who was my neighbor in Manhattan Beach, and if you don't know Manhattan Beach, viewers, it's this little tiny little hamlet on a beautiful beach in Southern California. And she lived very near me. And the house that I don't know, sold for $400,000 now is worth $4.5 million.
Yeah,
I messed up.
it's insane.
I mean, it is insane. So then you take the property taxes, the income taxes, etc. They come out here to Scottsdale and they're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
I love it. I don't care if
yeah,
it's 105 degrees today. I have air
mhm,
conditioning.
yeah. Well, you should try New York. I know we have liberals here, and we've have high taxes, but we got four seasons, and they're not really that bad. And there are places where housing is affordable. But I mean, I some of my friends in Florida are kind of complaining about the weather. So didn't you know that it's hot down there? And there are issues of insurance, getting
No
homeowners
question.
insurance and all that. But look, people are going to live where they want to live, and families and all that matter in that regard. But all in all, housing is definitely a problem. But the baby boomers are spending in areas where, like healthcare, like leisure and hospitality, travel, and all these areas is where you see employment quite strong, and that in turn keeps the consumer going.
Yeah, I'm with you. So, since you've been right on all your other forecasts, are you making forecasts for 2026 yet?
Yeah, sure. Again, 6,600. for the S&P 500 by the end of this year. I think it may the rally may stall out here for the rest of August into September, and then I think we'll be able to get a year-end rally. And once we kind of get the Fed uncertainty behind us one way or the other, I think people will see that the economy is still resilient. We've had the most widely anticipated recession of all time
Yeah,
that never happened since 2022.
right.
I think the economy has demonstrated its resilience, and I think that resilience continues to take earnings up. Our earnings dramatically beat expectations in the first quarter and the second quarter of this year. Earnings are an all-time record high. I'm looking for earnings next year to be $300 a share for the S&P 500, followed by $350 a share in 2027, and that gets me up to 7,500 on the S&P 500.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Don't be
Uh,
selling your stocks for crying out loud. Hey,
by the end of next year, and
wow.
10,000 by the end of the decade. That's kind of my roaring 2020s story, which I've been telling since 2020,
I was going to say,
which looked delusional back then. But here we are, record high in the stock market, record high in GDP, record high in consumption per household. So and we're getting kind of a 1920s kind of froth with in some areas of technology, and I think the market's kind of maybe starting to do a little self-correcting.
yep,
What's today's Beanie Babies? The Lulu babies or
right,
whatever.
the Lulu, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
uh, in my firm, we're about transformational growth and investing in transformational growth. Um, it was intriguing. I'm sure you read this article by Joyce Vance in the New York Times Sunday section a couple of weeks ago about the attention economy and how, in essence, what makes the meme stocks go up, or what makes the small nuclear reactor stocks, or the EVTOL, flying planes, all that stuff. It's retail. That's the thing, Ed, that gets me, is how much of retail is focused on no earnings, super sexy stuff. That sort of reminds me of the 90s. Am I smoking
Well,
something?
yes, to a certain extent. But we've already played that video a couple of times in the
Yeah.
past couple of years without any dire consequences. We've had some pretty nasty sell-offs in Bitcoin. We've seen the meme stocks blow up. Nobody's really talking about SPACs anymore. And these all things all happened in the past 2, 3 years, and they blew up. And all we could get out of it was a correction in the S&P 500 that didn't last very long. And if you got the top right, you probably missed the bottom. And it was an amazing. It's been an amazing recovery. So it's a very resilient economy. It's a very resilient capital market, credit market. We just don't seem to get the kind of financial crises that we used to get. And I think it's because maybe the banks are behaving themselves better. If things blow up, it's somebody gets hit with a drop in their rate of return. Maybe they lose money, but it doesn't become an economy-wide calamity the
Right.
way it used to happen when the banks suddenly had a whole bunch of bad loans and decided to hunker down and not lend to even people who had good credit.
Well, you brought up Bitcoin. So give me your crypto chops here, Dr. Ed.
I'm just not equipped to comment on crypto because I'm a old-fashioned strategist. I need dividends, I need interest, I
Yeah.
need rent, I need something I can discount. But I have described crypto as digital tulips. Now, before you get all kinds of angry emails tossed at me, that's actually a very bullish comment.
It is.
It's not bearish. Digital tulips is a comparison to what happened in Amsterdam centuries ago, where people bought tulips, the tulip prices went up, and then they crashed. The difference between the tulip mania and the Bitcoin, whatever you want to call it, mania, is that the Bitcoin market's open 24 hours a day, every day. So it's 24 by 7, unlike what we saw in Amsterdam. And Amsterdam's a tiny little town. Once everybody that wanted to speculate in tulips bought it and then got killed with the prices coming down. This
Right.
time around, this is a Bitcoin sold in a global market, and we haven't even, there's so many more people that could be buying it. So maybe I think where the issue for Bitcoin comes in is if somebody figures out how to, create a key for blockchain. If you
Right.
figure out how to, use, quantum computers
Right.
to break encryption codes, and suddenly you hear that people have lost, a
Yeah.
few thousand or a few million or several million because somebody stole it from their blockchain account.
Yeah.
Then you're going to have a real serious problem in the crypto market. But for now, stablecoin kind of makes sense. I mean, if everything, if you can trade everything with a stable coin and the clearing is immediate because it's all protected by blockchain, that kind of makes sense. But again, we're really relying on this technology being bulletproof,
Bulletproof. Yeah. Well,
hack-proof.
Ethereum, blockchain, we're long Ethereum for that, specific reason. Uh, but but what about Visa? Well,
Well,
what about the merchant charges? What about MasterCard?
again, I need to learn something about that. Why Ethereum is better than Bitcoin when it comes to security?
Well, Ethereum is actually the blockchain chain that other cryptos use. So there's a fee, there's a gas fee, meaning that X amount of time you get revenue from that. So it has a revenue model,
Okay,
and then so it has absolute, it's an application that it still has to be operated by computers that run the Ethereum blockchain. But
okay,
I was going to go on your tulip point. I was going to say, well, the one thing is I remember about the tulip craze is that everybody went out and planted tulips, right? Wasn't it sort of the whereas in
yeah,
yeah, and we're in
yeah,
blockchain, or at least in Bitcoin, there's a finite amount, and it cuts in half every uh, 2.5 years.
yeah. But again, the whole idea of Bitcoin was that, as you said, it's a limited supply, but there's an unlimited supply of cryptocurrencies, aren't there? I
Oh,
mean,
true. Oh, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean,
So
that's a whole other discussion. Hey, so um, 10,000, and is there a earnings per share number that you're using to get there? I assume, my friend.
400,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
Very doable, very much in line with what was achieved before. And in the roaring 2020s, as I said, that's thesis has worked out pretty well as an
Yes, it
investment
has.
and forecasting story until now. And I think it's got another 5 years. And oh, by the way, people say, well, yeah, the 1920s ended badly with the Depression. And, I think we're testing that notion right now with the tariffs. And you don't see the stock market taking a dive on all this tariff war that's going on.
Well, it was like 7 days, Ed, but
Yeah, but that was kind of it, and the market kind of got bored with it and decided let's try going to the upside for a
yeah,
while. But I'm thinking maybe I'll start talking about the roaring 2030s. We really are in science fiction land. I mean, we're if back in 2000 you told me kind of what's in
I
the
know.
future, I said, oh, yeah, that's
Oh,
that.
yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh, come on. You're
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, I'm
Look,
talking
even
to you.
even when I talked about the roaring 2020s in 2020,
Right.
I didn't know that AI was going to be this hot thing, and I still don't know that for sure, but it certainly has been hot for the stock market.
Well, the whole AI tech stack, if you will, right? Um, we're getting a necessary breather, don't you think? I mean, it's been running so hot and heavy. Nothing, what's the old one? Trees don't grow to the sky or whatever.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, to me, it's healthy, and we've been looking
absolutely.
for a pullback. And I don't think a lot of new investors understand that it is healthy. Could you
Yeah,
explain why it is healthy?
yeah. Well, I mean, any correction in a situation which could become a melt up. I mean, in some ways it is. You got 30 multiples on the Magnificent Seven. The overall S&P 500, as a result, has a 22 multiple, which is not that far away from the tech bubble of
Right.
25. And then the Buffett ratio is 3, which is an all-time record high. Buffett said he used to worry about it when it got to 2. So we're valuation wise, we're right up there. But I think the market's come around to my view that the economy is resilient. And if it's resilient, then maybe we are willing to pay a higher PE because we're not necessarily going to get a recession anytime soon. So I don't really have a problem with these PEs. I don't really want to see them go any higher, and having a correction where we go from 22 to 20 would be most welcome indeed. Give us some time to let the earnings picture continue
Hmm.
to strengthen. And it's been doing that. The earnings picture in the first and second quarters were remarkable. If I told you all the things that were happening on the economic policy side between Doge
Yeah.
and the tariffs and all the upheaval geopolitically, so you say it's going to be a tough environment for stocks, and they've done earnings have been amazing, and I think they're going to continue to be amazing. And again, I think I don't want to jinx it, but there is kind of sort of a fountain of youth here situation where it kind of the bull feeds on itself because again, the more that we information we can process, the more information we're going to process. And that requires a lot of computing power. It requires a lot of data centers. And so all this fear that all these data centers are going to go bust, that we're just creating too much capacity for a demand that's not there. I disagree with that. And I look at my own, Peter Lynch always said, look at what you're doing. And I've been kind of skeptical about the AI. And then I said, well, wait a second. I'm using it every day. But then I said, yeah, but I'm irrelevant. But if a lot of us are using it every day and
Yep.
kind of creating more data, then that becomes a whole another story.
Okay. Well, there's Moore's law. You have now created Yardeni's law.
I'll take it.
Yardeni's law is the more that we use data, the more valuable it gets. It's a positive feedback loop, and the cost of that data goes down because of the productivity that you
Yeah,
gain, right?
I'll take that. I'll also take Yardeni's tombstone, which will say Ed Yardeni was usually bullish and usually right.
I love it, brother. You know what? We need you more than once a year because
Okay.
your positivity is just 10 times more powerful than the yakety yaks worried about, well, gosh, Google, tokens cost too much, blah, blah. I mean, it's been really intriguing to me to see the sort of the naysayers. And you, my friend, have been right. And
Thank
that's
you.
what it counts on Wall Street. It's not,
Thank you.
your looks, not your whatever, it's
Whatever.
being right. So thanks so
No
much for
problem.
being with us. We
Thank
will see
you.
you again soon. 10,000 by 2030.
Sure, why not?
I love it. All right, cheers.
2029,
2029. Okay.
end of the decade.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Ed Yardeni. If you ignore him, you're making a big mistake. If you're running your own money or you're having somebody else run your money, when that person comes out and starts boo-hooing, just watch this tape again.